Nightmare terror. The wind howled through the desolate, moonless night as Sarah stumbled through the dark forest. She could barely see 2 feet in front of her, and the gnarled trees seemed to reach out with twisted skeletal branches, grasping at her as she passed. The air was thick with an eerie silence broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush. Sarah had lost her way hours ago, and her flashlight's feeble beam provided little comfort. She could feel a growing sense of unease, as if the forest itself was alive and malevolent. Every step she took seemed to echo through the trees, amplifying her isolation. Then, out of the inky blackness, a faint ethereal light appeared. It was like a will-o'-the-wisp, flickering and dancing in the distance. Sarah's heart quickened, and she began to follow the mysterious light, desperate for any sign of civilization. As she approached the light, she realized it was emanating from an old, decrepit cabin. The structure looked as though it had been abandoned for years, with rotting wood and shattered windows. But the light beckoned her closer, like a moth drawn to a flame. Sarah cautiously pushed open the creaking door and entered the cabin. Inside, the atmosphere was oppressive, and the air was heavy with a pungent, foul odor. The room was filled with ancient, decaying furniture, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like sinister tapestries. But what caught her attention was a series of disturbing paintings on the walls. The paintings depicted grotesque scenes of death and torment, twisted, contorted figures with hollow eyes and grotesque smiles engaged in unspeakable acts of violence and depravity. Each image seemed to be more disturbing than the last, and Sarah's unease deepened. As she explored further, Sarah heard a soft, sinister whispering coming from the shadows. It was as though the very walls of the cabin were speaking to her, and the voices seemed to be growing louder and more insistent. She couldn't make out the words, but the malevolent intent behind them was chilling. In a state of growing panic, Sarah tried to flee the cabin, but the door had inexplicably disappeared. She was trapped, alone in this nightmarish place. The whispers grew louder and more malevolent, and the disturbing paintings on the walls seemed to come to life, their grotesque figures writhing and contorting in a macabre dance. Desperation clawed at her as she realized there was no way out. The cabin itself seemed to be closing in on her, the walls pulsating with an evil presence. Sarah screamed in terror, her cries echoing through the forest, but there was no one to hear her. She was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape, left to endure the horrors of the haunted cabin for all eternity. Libby the Doll. In a quiet, picturesque town nestled deep in the woods of Georgia, there was an old, dilapidated Victorian house that had been abandoned for decades. Locals had long whispered about the dark secrets that shrouded the place, but few dared to venture near it. The stories that circulated were tales of eerie sounds, ghostly apparitions, and a cursed doll that had been left behind. The legend of the creepy doll began with a family that had once inhabited the house. The Morgans were an ordinary, happy family, or so it seemed. They had a daughter, Emily, who was known for her obsession with dolls. She collected them from all over the world, amassing a vast, diverse collection that filled her room. One fateful night, a powerful thunderstorm swept through the town, setting the old house ablaze. The flames consumed the entire building, leaving nothing behind but charred ruins. Miraculously, the Morgans survived, but Emily's room was destroyed, and her beloved dolls were lost to the flames. Or so the Morgans thought. Several weeks later, after the ashes had cooled and the Morgans had relocated, they received an unexpected package. It was addressed to Emily, and inside was a doll unlike any she had ever seen. It had porcelain skin, piercing blue eyes, and a lifelike, haunting smile. It was dressed in a tiny, frilly, antique gown. The moment Emily touched the doll, an eerie sensation washed over her. It felt as if the doll's eyes were watching her every move, and its smile seemed to grow wider when nobody was looking. Still, she couldn't part with it. She placed it on her bedside table, and each night she would hear faint, ghostly giggles that seemed to come from the doll itself. Emily's behavior began to change. She became obsessed with the doll, spending hours talking to it as if it were a real friend. She stopped going to school, barely ate, and grew increasingly pale and gaunt. Her parents, worried about their daughter's strange behavior, sought the help of a local priest. The priest visited the Morgans' new home and immediately sensed the presence of something malevolent. He performed a cleansing ritual, but it only seemed to anger the entity bound to the doll. The doll's once muted giggles grew louder and more unsettling. One night, as a thick fog settled over the town, Emily's parents were jolted awake by her blood-curdling screams. They rushed to her room and found her writhing in pain, the creepy doll clutched tightly in her hands. The priest was called again, but by the time he arrived, it was too late. Emily was found dead, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling, and the doll was gone. Since that night, the creepy doll has been missing, but the stories continue. Locals claim they can still hear the echoing laughter and mournful cries of a young girl lost to the sinister forces that had taken hold of her. Some say the doll is cursed, others claim it is possessed by a vengeful spirit. Regardless of the truth, the Victorian house and its creepy doll remain a source of fear and fascination, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most innocent of objects. Teen's Nightmare. In the small, forgotten town of Blackwood, nestled deep within a dense, ancient forest, a chilling legend whispered through the autumn winds. Locals spoke of the dreaded Hollow Willow Manor, a decrepit mansion that stood alone in the heart of the woods. Its menacing silhouette cast long shadows, and its windows were like vacant, soulless eyes staring into the abyss. Generations of Blackwood residents had grown up hearing stories about the mansion, and every Halloween, daring teenagers would venture into the forest, testing their courage. They would return with tales of eerie whispers and phantom footsteps, swearing they had glimpsed shadowy figures watching them from the dark corners of the mansion. Among those who dared to enter the mansion were Emma and her friends, Josh and Sarah. They decided to explore Hollow Willow Manor one fateful October night, determined to uncover the truth behind the legends. Armed with flashlights, they crossed the threshold into the chilling darkness. The air inside was heavy and frigid, and the trio's footsteps echoed through the desolate corridors. Emma felt a shiver crawl down her spine as they ventured deeper into the mansion. Paintings on the walls seemed to come alive, their subjects shifting in their frames, their eyes following the intruders. As they ascended a creaky staircase, the whispers began. Faint, ghostly voices seemed to swirl around them, murmuring cryptic messages that sent shivers down their spines. The trio tried to dismiss the voices as a trick of the wind, but the unsettling sensation persisted. They reached the upper floor, where the legend spoke of a cursed room. The door to this room was ancient and rotting, and as they pushed it open, the room's haunting secret was revealed. The walls were adorned with tattered wallpaper, upon which figures trapped in torment writhed and contorted. In the center of the room lay an ornate, dusty mirror that seemed to hold a dark presence. Emma approached the mirror and stared into its depths. Her reflection began to distort and twist, revealing a nightmarish scene of herself trapped in a never-ending loop of torment. She watched in horror as the mirror showed her own death, over and over again. Terrified, Emma stumbled backward, knocking into the mirror. The room erupted into chaos as shadows leapt from the walls, reaching out for the intruders. Josh and Sarah screamed in terror as the room seemed to come alive, its wallpaper figures breaking free from their confines, and the eerie voices grew louder, their sinister laughter echoing in the darkness. Emma, Josh, and Sarah fled the room, but the mansion itself seemed determined to keep them inside. The corridors twisted and contorted, leading them in circles, while ghostly apparitions tormented them at every turn. It was as if Hollow Willow Manor fed on their fear, drawing its malevolent strength from their terror. Desperation overwhelmed the trio as they fought to escape the mansion's grasp. Hours passed, and they found themselves exhausted and disoriented. They stumbled back to the front door, gasping for breath, and just when they thought they were finally free, the door slammed shut with a deafening thud, trapping them inside. As the morning sun crept over the horizon, the mansion's malevolence waned and its grip on the trio loosened. They finally managed to open the door, but the horrors they had experienced in Hollow Willow Manor haunted them for the rest of their lives. The legend of the mansion grew darker, and no one dared to enter its sinister halls again. Blackwood's woods remained a place of mystery, where the whispers of the past still echoed through the trees, and the haunting memory of Hollow Willow Manor lingered in the hearts of those who had survived its horrors.